The name of our company is Climb Strong. And so obviously we are interested in having some strength. But when we talk about strong, we move beyond just pure raw development of force. And we want to think about having a presence and an ability to do well in the sport. And so today I want to talk about how to look at your training and how to keep your strength training in particular in perspective. Because so many of us can go so far down the road of getting stronger that we forget that the end goal is performance enhancement. One of the things that we recognize about strength is that it's extremely useful, that strong people tend to get injured less, that strong people tend to have a higher work capacity, and that climbers that have really, really good stamina also are very, very strong. They're able to build their training on top of this general foundation. And so, yes, we really want you to have high levels of general strength. We want you to be as injury proof as possible, but we also need to recognize that it's not always the fingers that are holding us back. These days, there's an almost epidemic level of climbers pulling blocks off the floor with a big stack of weights on a loading pen. We have these people that are holding a straight arm position straight down from their shoulder, and they're picking up lots of times way more than their body weight in the hope that somehow this is going to transfer to their ability to climb well. And although that might have a positive transfer, whether that actually is true is very, very far from understood at this point. You have to understand that there's a whole bunch of aspects to performance, and we do this with our coaches at Climb Strong. Each of our coaches, when addressed with a problem, when we have an athlete that is having a situation occur regularly in climbing, I get to the end of a route and this happens, or when I get to the crux, it feels like this is the problem. The coaches go through a really careful thought process of what really is the problem here and what might the solutions be. We use a thing that we call the performance wheel, and it's simply a rubric for us to think about training. And this wheel is divided into three major parts. The first part is the mental sector. We have then the physical sector, and then we have the technical sector. And if you think about these different coaching modes or different advices you'll get from a coach, you'll see a coach that's like, oh yeah, man, it's all mental. It's just your mindset. You got to fix things there. We have coaches that are putting things out on Instagram that are like, yeah, it's all about strength and you need to be lifting barbells and you need to be doing this. Or maybe you just need to be doing a bunch of body weight stuff and jumping around in your garage. You might have somebody that's like, you just need to climb more and just do technical stuff. And none of those things is true. Climbing is extremely complex, and we need to be very, very good detectives when it comes to figuring out what the true limitations are. Even though your fingers are the last thing that you notice coming free from the rock a lot of the time, and very often it's like your endurance or your strength in those hands will show up and you'll be like, man, if I was just a little bit stronger, I would have been able to pull on that. Or if I had just a little bit more endurance, I would have been able to keep climbing. But that story is a very limited one, especially when we see that the highest performers in the world are not necessarily those with the highest numbers in the gym. When we look at this performance wheel, we can then divide it into a few more sections. We can subdivide the mental part of climbing into emotional things, into tactical decisions, into cognitive problems with sequencing and understanding how movement works. If we're looking at the technical aspect of it, we have to remember that there's positioning, there's movement, and there's a really big momentum component to the way that we climb. And then in the physical development realm, we've got to look at strength and power and capacity and endurance and mobility. And we start to understand that there's a whole bunch to this. And these are simply these main things we look at in training, let alone things like nutrition and recovery and things like that. And so when you're assessing your needs and you're looking at pursuing a particular thing in order to get better, you need to keep asking the question is this the thing I need to develop? One of the examples that I give is that my overhead pulling strength, when I pull against the strain gauge, is pretty close to my body weight. I'm pulling on a 20 mil edge and I can pull down really hard. But when I pull with my hand below my shoulder, I'm way down close to about a quarter of my body weight when I can really generate force here. And so when I'm having a problem locking off on the moon board, is it that my fingers are not strong enough here, or they're not strong enough pulling a big heavy block off the floor? Or is it that in this specific position, I don't have the requisite strength? And then will picking up a block from the floor or hanging off a hangboard with a straight arm rectify this problem? Or do I need to take one step further and look at my body position? Look at the position of my body when I'm in my weakest? Do I need to look at my tactics, my recovery? Do I need to look at the strategies I'm using when I'm bouldering? There are all kinds of things we need to think about. And so anytime that you're hung up and you start to recognize a problem in your training, it's really essential that we step back and say, hey, what in performance could I possibly look at in order to clear up this problem? The really difficult thing about training for climbing is that there's a lot of different moving parts. And also the real beautiful thing about training for climbing is there's a lot of different parts. This is why a particular height or body size or shape doesn't really show up as the ideal in climbing. Whether you're explosive or you have better endurance is not necessarily the ideal in climbing, because we can compensate with all of these different aspects of fitness. And so when I'm getting close to my max strength and I'm really able to pull very, very hard in a particular position, straight overhead or picking a block up off the floor or picking up a barbell, I need to question whether even more strength in that pattern is valuable, or if I'm pushing that pattern too far and actually getting on the backside of compensation from training. There's really interesting research that shows that the more we train a particular value of strength, it starts to taper back down on the far side if the volume gets too high. You can imagine this. If I'm hangboarding 6 or 7 or 8 days a week, I'm going to get weaker and weaker and weaker from the overload, right? And so if I can keep that in perspective and understand that a little bit of specific training is good, and some technical stuff, and working on my mental game, and trying to apply it in the real world environment, I'm going to have a lot better process. Now, this is a big picture view of training, but it's really critical in this aspect of I have this limitation and there might be several answers to this question. It's not always just get stronger fingers in one position or just get better at locking off. It might be a technical aspect, it might be a positioning aspect, it might be the way my brain is working when I'm doing the training that's holding me back. And so when you do get hung up, take a step back, look at climbing more holistically, and think about maybe 1 or 2 other solutions besides just banging your head against strength. Like I said, strength is a wonderful thing. It's important to develop, but it's not the only facet of climbing performance. And so when you hit the gym, think about going just a little beyond pulling hard when it comes to trying to get better.